In example 2, we're solving equations. Now, it's really important, first of all, to recognize that it's an equation and we're solving it. And when we're solving equations, there's two fundamental concepts that is really important to keep in mind. Solving involves balance and undoing calculations, doing opposite calculations. So for the balance part, we need to make sure that there is a left side and right side that is we can clearly balance. Okay, so I've drawn that yellow line, and there's a left side of that line and a right side of that line. And we need to undo the calculations, and we need to balance. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to just get rid of these brackets to make it a little bit easier to see what's on the left-hand side, and that means distributing. So I end up with 2x's minus 2 groups of 3 or minus 6 ones, and then we have a plus 4. That's the left-hand side, and again, it's important to keep track of what's on the left and what's on the right. So on the right-hand side, we didn't do anything. It's really important to keep track of what's still there. There's 1x, and there's a minus 5 ones. Now, to make it easier for us to undo these calculations, it's often good to group like terms or combine like terms. So always keep track of what you don't work on. So there's a 2x there, so I'm going to go 2x. Now I have minus 6 plus 4, and that's going to leave me with a minus 2. That's the left-hand side, and again, it's important to make sure that you count for everything on the left-hand side and everything on the right-hand side. So we're going to have still the x and a minus 5. So at this point, we have an equation. We're solving for x, so we need to get x by itself. So we want to group the x's on one side. So what we're going to do is we're going to move the x's to one side. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the x here with the minus x. And because it's a balance, I have to make sure I do the exact same on the other side. So minus x there. And then I can account for that. So I have 2x minus x. That leaves me with 1x. And these are just going to cancel out. Now, in this step, I'm going to also move or get rid of that minus 2 with a plus 2. And because I did a plus 2 on one side, I have to do a plus 2 on the other side to keep everything balanced on the left and right side. And this minus 2 and plus 2, they're 0 pairs, so they cancel out. So all I have on the left-hand side now is 1x. Okay, there's 1x on the left-hand side, and I just have to account for what's on the right-hand side. So I have minus 5 plus 2, and that's minus 3 or negative 3. And notice that my calculations are all going vertically. I can see that my calculation of minus 5 plus 2 equals negative 3 is all happening vertically. So it kind of looks like if you follow this line, there's my vertical calculation of minus 5 plus 2. And that then leaves me with x by itself, which means I've solved the equation. So there's my answer, x equals negative 3. So again, balance and undoing calculations is how we solve equations. This next one has a squared in here, and this was particularly difficult. But a couple things I want to make note of is that when there's a square and a minus, we never square when there's minuses in the bracket or pluses in the bracket. Squares and plus and minus do not mix. Anytime you apply a square with a plus or minus, it's always going to be wrong. So what we don't want to do is we don't want to square the 2x to get 4x squared minus 1 squared. Okay, that's wrong. That will never work. Now, we don't need to do that anyways because we're not doing the squared. We want to undo the square to solve for x. Because remember, solving is getting x by itself, and we want to undo calculations to get x by itself. So we don't need to square. What we need to focus on is that minus 5. We can get rid of that minus 5 with a plus 5 on this side. And again, when we undo, we have to balance. So we're going to balance with a plus 5 on this side. Again, we need to make sure that we can see clearly left side and right side. Okay, on the right-hand side, I'm going to have 4 plus 5, and that's going to give me 9 on the right-hand side. Negative 5 plus 5 cancel out. So on the left-hand side, we're going to end up with 2x minus 1 all squared. And I'm just going to move that a little bit down. So on the left-hand side, we're going to have, or right-hand side, we're going to have it equal to 9. Okay, so we end up with equals 9. And again, I just want to make sure we keep track of the left side and right side of that balance. So for the next part, we don't want to square this. Again, first of all, we're not calculating here. We want to undo the square, not do the square. And also, squares can't be done when there's pluses and minuses. So what we're doing is undoing squares, and we're going to undo squares with the opposite square root. If I square root one side, I have to keep it balanced by square rooting the entire right-hand side. So on the right-hand side, I get square root of 9 is 3. I'm just going to put a little asterisk here because that's, for now, we're okay with that, but I'm going to show you that there's actually another answer to this. And when we square root a square, they undo each other. So we're left with 2x minus 1. The square and square root undo each other, so we're left with nothing. Okay, we're just left with the 2x minus 1. So then I could solve the rest of this with opposites and balance. Okay, so 3 plus 1 is 4. 1 minus 1 cancels out, so we're left with 2x equals 4. Get rid of the times with the divide, balance it, keep track of left-hand side and right-hand side. We get 1x equals 2. And we can check this by plugging it back into the original equation. So 2 times 2 is 4, minus 1 is 3, squared is 9, minus 5 equals 4, so that's correct. So that is a correct answer. Okay, so I did mention that when that 3 wasn't the only answer. And we're not responsible for this right now, but later on, and in particular in grade 11, we deal with quadratics and we have to deal with the plus and minus possibilities all the time. So this 9, some number squared equals 9. Well, that number could have been that number 2x minus 1, which I squared. Okay, remember the 2x minus 1 was squared. So that number squared equals 9. So that number could have been 3, but it also could have been negative 3. So there is another possibility that we have to be aware of. Okay, and again, right now we're not responsible for that one, but that down the road, this is something we're going to see. So we get another answer, and we can find that other answer by undoing the rest of this. So we get minus 2 on the right-hand side, 2x equals negative 2, divide by 2, divide by 2, so we get 1x equals negative 1, and I could check that negative 1. Negative 1 times 2 is negative 2, minus 1 is negative 3, negative 3 squared is positive 9, positive 9 minus 5 is 4, so that negative 1 also works. Okay, so we're not responsible for that one right now, but later on we will have to worry about this plus and minus.